The printing press around the world running at full speed with no signs of stopping anytime soon.
They seem like they're all doing it. Some say all this money printing is manipulating the currency markets. Are we on the brink of a currency war? We'll talk about what that means. Joining us now is James Rickards. He is Tangent Capital Partners Senior Managing Director, and Michael Woolfolk. He is Bank of New York Mellon's Senior Currency Strategist. Gentlemen, great to see you both. James, first to you. Let's pull back, and before we look at specific currencies, to gold. Is there any currency these days that can hold value as well as gold can?
Sure, there are a few. I would say the Australian dollar, Canadian dollar, Singapore dollar, and the euro will be the strongest currencies going forward. The reason is they're not
as good as gold, though.
Well, gold will be the best over time. There's no question about that, because even the Australian Reserve Bank, which I would say Australia is a very strong currency because it has a lot of inflows in the small capital market, but even they, Reserve Bank of Australia, are cutting rates. So they're all going to go down somewhat against gold, but on a relative basis, some of these currencies will do better than others, obviously.
Michael, where does the U.S. dollar fit into all of this?
Well, we're going to see, I think, a year of two halves for the U.S. dollar. The first half of the year, we're going to see continued dollar weakness. Second half of the year, we're going to see the dollar, I think, gain some ground against the euro, certainly against the yen.
Well, Michael, one thing that scares a lot of people, there's an old term called beggar thy neighbor. We saw that happen at different times during our history in the 20th century, where one country tries to make its goods, its export goods, cheaper by devaluing their currency, and then its neighbor will try to do the same, and there'll be a war back and forth, and eventually it can lead to trade wars. Is there any danger that that might happen this time?
Well, I don't think that there's a danger of an outbreak of a trade war, but certainly an expansion of the current currency tensions. The so-called currency war, I think, will continue beyond what we've seen in 2012. It's an old saw in foreign exchange, and that is you cannot devalue your way to prosperity. Right. So I think in terms of devaluations, you see a move back from the expansion of flexible exchange rates we've seen over the last 20 years in 2012. I see that continuing. In 2013, nationalistic-minded governments taking control of their foreign exchange policy for their own self-interest. But no, I don't see this as a long-term shift towards currency management, towards fixed exchange rates.
Okay, Jim, I have a question for you. How does the Japanese yen fit into all of this? It's in the news all the time because of the Bank of Japan and everything they're doing to ease monetary policy, stimulate the economy. What are your thoughts on the yen?
That's a great question, Lauren. The Japanese yen is an exception to almost everything else I've said. The U.S. policy is to cheapen the dollar against all of our major trading partners, so Taiwan, Korea, China, Europe, and the rest. Japan is an exception for a couple of reasons. Number one, they actually need the help. They suffered more from Fukushima, from the earthquake and the tsunami and the meltdown than people realize, so they need some help. Number two, and they have nothing else going for them, lousy demographics, high debt to GDP, etc. But the other reason is they've now become the buyer of last resort of treasuries. You know, that used to be China's job, but China's reducing its net purchase of treasuries, and actually, if you notice, Japan is increasing them. So the Fed's kind of cutting Japan a break, saying, hey, we'll let you cheapen against the dollar as long as you buy our treasuries. But for everyone else, it's currency war. Michael said, you know, you can't devalue your way to prosperity. I agree with that. That doesn't mean that people won't try. They sort of forget the lessons of history, and they're trying as hard as they can.
Well, Jim, let's go closer to home. What about the euro? A lot of people a year ago saying the euro was ready for a big devaluation, but it seems to be holding its own right now, no?
Yeah, that actually comes as no surprise, and I've been saying for well over a year that the euro is strong and getting stronger. I continue with that. Nobody's leaving the euro. Nobody's getting kicked out. They'll actually add some members over time. There are a couple of reasons for it. Number one, the U.S. is out to cheapen the dollar. The easy thing about cross rates is two currencies cannot cheapen against each other at the same time. So if we're going to have a cheap dollar, you're going to have a stronger euro. That's the easy part. But the other part is Chinese capital is dying to come into Europe because China wants to get out of dollars. Now, they're buying gold as fast as they can. We know that. They also want to invest in Europe, but they wanted to see the Europeans get their act together. Well, guess what? The Europeans do have their act together. Now the Chinese capital is ready to come in. So that's another support for the euro.
Jim, are you saying that Europe's doing everything right?
Europe's the only group that's doing everything right. I like to say Angela Merkel is the only one who understands economics because she's not an economist. She's a physicist. She actually understands how these systems work. But yeah, Europe is going through a lot of pain and so-called austerity right now, but they're actually making the structural adjustment they need. U.S. and China are in denial about their structural adjustments. They'll hit a wall later, and it'll be worse.
Although, Michael, a lot of people would say, you know, raising taxes is not the way to balance your books. And, of course, Spain seems to be proof of that because they've raised their value-added tax a lot, and they're still not growing at all. I'm just wondering if you go back to next to gold, I think the safest currency in the world is the Swiss franc. Is that still a buy?
No, it's not still a buy necessarily. I mean, what we've seen in the last several weeks has been a rally in the Euro-Swiss cross. I think it surprised a lot of people. But as the dollar and the yen have weakened, so has the Swiss franc, although on a delayed basis. There's been in the foreign exchange market really a sell-off in the safe haven currencies as we've seen the January effect really catch a tailwind here, much like what we saw last year.
Wow, if there's no safety in a Swiss franc, where is safety? Thank you, gentlemen. Good to see you both. James Rickards and Michael Woolfolk.